This item was heard by the Planning Commission on April 13, 2016, and at that meeting, it was denied by the Planning Commission, and that denial has been appealed by the applicant to the City Council. And what's being proposed is the construction of a cultural center / temple facility on Norco Drive. The parcel where it's being proposed is a vacant parcel just south of an existing city reservoir. It's okay, there it is. If you look at the site plan, okay, this is the site being proposed, where the facility is proposed. Sorry for my shaking. This is Church on the Hill, or what used to be Church on the Hill. This is Beacon Hill Church. This is the Mormon Church. I shake too much. And down below is the St. Avenue Eastern Orthodox Church. The site is just over 4 acres. What's being proposed is a temple facility of 20. About 25,000 square feet. The bottom floor, 24,975 on the bottom floor, and then the second floor is 4,310 square feet, and then there's a separate 5,063 square foot gazebo. The project is located in a A1 zone, and it's in the A1 zone, as in all zones in the city. A facility for a religious facility basically is allowed upon approval of a conditional use permit. Okay, this is the site plan. It's hard to read, but this is the site plan that's being proposed. The main church facility is down here at the bottom. This is Norco Drive over here. And then there's like a gazebo and tennis courts in the back next to where the city reservoir site is. I'll briefly go through the zoning requirements for this type of use in the A1 zone. First off, as I indicated, it's allowed with approval of a conditional use permit. The parking for the facility is based upon the open floor area of the primary sanctuary room, which in this facility would not have chairs in it. And so in that situation, what we've done in the past is we look at the closest similar type of use, which is an open gymnasium for a school that's considered a public gathering space, and the parking is based upon 1 space per 35 square feet. And based upon that, the project site itself requires 102 parking spaces, and the site design has 107 being proposed. There's not a landscaping requirement in the A1 zone, but what we do with a facility like this that's a permitted use in the A1 zone, we use commercial standards. In the CG zone, the standard for landscaping is 15%, and they exceed that requirement and are proposing 18%. The project would be accessed from Norco Drive. The driveway would have a controlled gate just off the street a little bit. 1 lane for entrance, 1 lane for exiting, and then all the parking would be up at, or indicated on where the main church building's located, and there's a few parking up at the top by the gazebo and the tennis courts. The use of the building is primarily the sanctuary that I already spoke about. There are classrooms on both levels. There's a saint's residence, which is a 2-bedroom house where visiting saints would reside, and then people coming to the center wanting to speak to the visiting saints would have that opportunity, and they would be staying within that residence. The prayer room I already spoke about would accommodate 230 people. There's a covered patio that I already spoke about. And there's a multi-purpose hall that would be used for various functions, for parties and receptions and other ceremonies, yoga classes, etc. Sunday classrooms. There's 6 small rooms on the first floor and 15 small classrooms for 1st through 6th grade on the 2nd floor. The parking lot is split into the 2 levels as I indicated. The facility will be open from 8:30 to 5, Monday through Saturday, with people coming to visit, not in set meetings. They come as they are allowed or have opportunity to speak with one of the resident saints. And then most of the activity would be on Sunday, and there would be prayer ceremonies throughout the day from 8:30 to 5, same hours. When the Planning Commission reviewed this, most of the concerns that came up had to do with, one, the design of the building, because it is okay, this is the elevation that was reviewed by the Planning Commission. This elevation required a variance because portions of the roof, primarily the domes that were proposed, exceeded the allowed 35-foot height in the A1 zone. Most of the structure is below 35 feet, but the arch that you see in back of the main dome, the dome, and then the other 2 domes all exceeded 35 feet, and they requested variance for that. In its discussion, the Planning Commission was concerned, there were a number of concerns with it, one of it being the design of it. It didn't reflect the Western architecture. The other was, and this was also a recommendation from both of the members of the Architectural Review Subcommittee, in addition to not reflecting any Western architecture, but that the site itself was not an appropriate site for this level of construction. The things needed that would need to be done to the site in terms of the amount of grading and the height of retaining walls and that sort of thing, to them signified that too much was being proposed on this particular site. Even though the church itself is not that big, but in order to accommodate the proposal, a lot of grading and retaining wall height would need to be done in order to accomplish the flat pad to construct. At its finished grade, the lower level, which is what you see at the top, would be 20 feet above the level of Norconian Drive. And then to the north of that, which is adjacent to Church on the Hill, they would have roughly a 20-foot grid wall to act as a retaining wall on that side of the building. Another concern that was brought up by the Planning Commission and members of the public that were at the meeting was the amount of parking. Even though I indicated that they meet the parking standard for analysis of what we have with the Norco Municipal Code, the statement was made that right now Norconian Drive, with the existing churches, has a lot of parking on it, which doesn't necessarily reflect that they don't have enough parking, because they're not prohibited from parking on the street. But each of the churches have been designed with the needed parking on site. But like I said, it doesn't prohibit people from wanting a quick getaway, parking on Norconian Drive so they can beat the traffic. So the primary issues, like I said, with the Planning Commission were the design of the building, the amount of grading and retaining walls that would have to be accomplished for this project to work on this site. One of the things that one of the things that staff requested from the developers was to give a line of sight analysis both from 5th Street and Norconian Drive. Actually, not from 5th Street, from Norconian Drive and from Norco Drive. And these are the sight line analysis. It's hard to read them, but pretty much when you're standing on Norconian, because of the height of the pad being 20 foot tall, you really would only see the dome, the main dome of the building as it was proposed to the Planning Commission. And then if you're standing on Norco Drive, you would not see any of it. But that doesn't take into account if you stand further back and the obstructions in the front that block your view from Norco Drive. As you get further back, those obstructions get smaller, and the church gets taller on the horizon. So, I guess I've covered everything. But there was a neighborhood meeting that was held on July 14th, and some of the concerns that were brought up at that meeting were what I just talked about, what residents would see from their properties, which is why staff requested the sightline analyses. The parking was brought up again because of the parking that already occurs on Norconian Drive. And in the end, the Planning Commission, in its deduction, determined that there was just too much to overcome for this project at this site. They did talk about the possibility of denying it without prejudice, which would, if a project is denied, a CUP, an applicant has to wait a full year before they can reapply for the same project. If it's denied without prejudice, they don't have to wait that year. And the Planning Commission did consider that in its deliberations and concluded that too much would be needed to try and fit this project onto this site, and so they denied it. That denial has been appealed to the City Council, and so now you have a lot of options before you. I'm going to read. You can concur with the Planning Commission and deny the project, and if that's the decision, then all that is needed is a roll call vote from the City Council. And the one thing I forgot is the applicant has provided they heard the message at the Planning Commission about the architecture, so what they, if I can get to it, what they provided is a revised elevation incorporating some elements that are more reflective of a Western architecture, getting rid of a lot of the domes. This proposed architecture is all under 35 feet, so they would not need a variance. So if the council determines that this architecture is appropriate, you can either overturn the denial of the Planning Commission and approve the project with the new elevations, which that also would only require a roll call vote. Another option is to send it back to the Planning Commission to reconsider it with this new architecture and more input from the Architectural Review Subcommittee. Another option is to overturn the Planning Commission and approve the project as it was presented to the Planning Commission with the original elevations, and that would require a resolution for approval, and that is attached to your staff report. If you went with the old architecture, you would also have to overturn the Planning Commission and approve the variance for exceeding the height limit. And I think that explains the 4 resolutions that are attached. So your options for the resolutions, I won't go through them. With that, I apologize, it's a lot of information, but I will stop talking and answer any questions. The applicants are in the audience and have requested an opportunity to address the City Council.
Does council have any questions for Steve? Steve? Or, Greg?
Thanks.
I have a multitude of questions, but I'm going to limit it for a little bit. We had received at least one, maybe a couple of emails on notification of the neighborhood meeting. Your staff report says surrounding owners within a 300-foot radius were notified. How many? Our code is a 300-foot radius and up to, we want to include 25 property owners.
Correct.
So was it just a 300-foot radius, or were up 25 property owners, adjacent property owners notified?
It went up to 25, so it went beyond 300.
Okay. Is the variance, my question on this is it on or off that originally in the report, the variance was denied, but the project was denied. And then we're being asked to review this variance, and then secondary architectural drawings are presented. Okay, that, am I safe in my assumption that those drawings were never presented back to planning?
Correct.
Okay. So that's based, I want to say this, that we can look at these new architectural drawings and make a decision on those if we choose. Correct. So where's the variance come into play on this? Is it on or off the table?
If the council goes with the new elevations that are up on the board, the variance is not needed. Okay, but go with the old
But
elevation.
theoretically, you could approve the project as it was presented to the planning commission, which would require the variance.
Correct.
Which is fine.
You don't want to make
They're just
that.
talking about the height variance, what about everything else?
We've gone all up now, ever since like project review board,
No.
the original design was, that was firm with the applicant. This is what we want, that's what was presented to
I see
planning.
little Sandy get up there.
And all the way up to
She's awesome.
this last review.
Up until after it was denied, then staff received what they were hoping would meet the Western design criteria better than what the original.
Right, then on your parking, I have a little question on that you have a note that in your research, staff's research, for a general meeting area with no fixed seats. To me, that's more of the applicant to make the case of how many people with an assembly rating. And we were talking earlier about hotels and hotel parking, that in that same code section 18.38, it says that when there are no fixed seats, and it's like bench seating, you assume 18 inches per individual. And did that come into your equation on the assembly area?
Well, first, so the audience knows what I'm talking about, there are two big open rooms. One is the sanctuary, or the prayer room, and then there's a multi-purpose room that would not be used, it wouldn't be used to make the prayer room bigger. It's a separate facility for other activities. So what they indicated to us, the applicant, is that there would be no seating whatsoever inside of the main sanctuary. So what we do then, and we've done it in the past, is go to the next closest similar use, which is an open gymnasium for public gathering for like a school facility. And in that situation, the parking requirement is one space per 35 square
Somebody
feet.
comes and buys to
See, I see a conflict in that, because that same code that tells you that says when there are no fixed seats, you assume 18 inches.
For a bench, but they're not going to have benches either.
Takes a bench away. 18 inches. Whether you sit on a bench or the floor, that code says assume 18 inches. So it's just a question I have that
I think the code with regard to the benches was intended to be drafted for those circumstances where the seats aren't fixed. That means you can bring in chairs or benches as opposed to having a fixed seat. In this case, I gather, about it, there is no seating at all.
Fireman, picture, name.
And let me put it this way, Steve, I understand all these drawings are preliminary, so please take my questions as preliminary.
Sure.
Okay. Then, I don't know if this is going to go over, well, let's go back to that scene. So I have questions on the parking. I think it's under parked. Okay. I don't know if you can answer these or if this will go to Chad, but in the upper, you go back to your site plan. Go up into that. Can I give you a complaint? Okay? In our conditions of approval, we call out a specific size of drawing we submitted.
That's right.
And I noticed everybody, give me a couple more of these and I can wallpaper my hallway. I just can't. All right? All right. So, let's take that upper quadrant up there, okay? So this is going to be a drainage question. The way I'm looking at that, the way I looked at those elevations,
wow.
that area is going to drain to a little detention basin. And then if that basin fills, it's going to drain into the adjoining property.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, where the tennis court is and the little trellis area and that little parking area. Do you read that the same way? That's right, for your site drainage. So, so I have a problem with that. Now, the property next door, do they have to give permission to accept drainage from an improved site, not the natural course of events if it was unimproved, but once it's improved, how can you put your drainage onto your neighbor's property? And does that make sense how I'm trying to ask that, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, cross drainage is common throughout the city as far as natural flow, from the hillside and naturally goes there, so it's a question of.
If it's
We'd have to determine
unimproved.
if it's unimproved.
Right.
There is still an allowance to have drainage even from your approved property, flow off your property and cross drain through. We'd have to look at it to verify, what type of roads have been done to effectively allow that water to drain through the properties. Again, not seeing exactly where the properties are here, it's hard for me to judge, is there a property there or not, or next door, and how we would accomplish that.
Well, there is a property next door to it.
Yeah, the data, of course, it's not showing.
Which
what that
would-
is. So we'd have to look at that to verify the
Right.
proper methodology too. Again, the intent is per code is to try to keep
Way too tall.
on-site from this area contained in this retention basin.
Correct.
And then if there's overflow, it will naturally have a mechanism to go across drain, which it can happen certainly with any properties, whether or not you need permission from the property owner. I don't have that answer.
All right. So,
And essentially, the rule is, I think that what Chad said, that the addition of the retention basin is intended to prevent the flows that overflow from exceeding the natural flows or concentrate the natural flows. But that's the purpose of the retention basin. So without the retention basin, that there'd be obviously a drainage problem with the retention basin. Presumably enough of it stays on site, that it's no worse situation than it was in the natural state. I mean, that's theoretical.
So I'm going to disagree with this. And like I said, understanding this is all just preliminary, all right? You haven't had your final reviews on that. But, and I'm not sure where it is under water quality, that all your site water needs to be retained on your own site. So that upper area, if that basin fills, it's going to go to the adjoining property, which could impact that property and that property's owner's future in developing, okay? So you come back down to your parking lot, you see that they have the underground storage facility to accept all that storm water. In the same way, I believe there's another little basin down there, but most of that is to go into underground storage, correct? Which recharges the water table. If that is to overfill, then it is to be connected to the storm drain, not spill out into the street. It's supposed to go into the storm drain as an overflow. And
You can't take more in the storm drain.
and I can show you that. It's not just our code, it's the code, okay?
Correct, there isn't a storm drain in this area.
There isn't.
No.
There's going to be. So that's my little thing on drainage, but that should be a condition that, where's our nearest storm drain? On
I believe it's on Norco.
Norco Drive. So there would need to be a condition that storm drain would have to run from this property and make a connection in Norco Drive. Okay. So let's just jump on that same topic to sewer. Where's the closest sewer connection?
The closest main connection is on Norco, and part of this plan includes them
Correct.
doing sewer
Right.
down to Norco.
Right, so we could go into the road now for sewer. Their sewer is shown on the, I'm gonna call it like the northerly PL, that connection. And why wouldn't that sewer be brought all the way across their property, in front of? So closer to the LDS church.
I believe, as far as the elevations, in order to pull and have proper elevations to pull that sewage off-site, we determined as far as if they could do their lateral connection to the north property, that would be sufficient to meet their demands.
Okay.
They didn't need to go all the way across when they could just stop basically at the northern part of their property.
But sewer will connect all the way to Norco Drive.
Correct.
Storm drainage sewer, now, so we go to water. At the water tank, we have a 12-inch water line that is inactive.
No, it's
At
at
this point, it's active.
Yeah, it comes down that access road that's on the south, would be on the
Right.
south side of the.
But there is I don't want to say it's a lateral, but there is a 12-inch line that runs northerly, right, that, Berlin, do you remember a few years ago that there was some grading activity out there and they hit that 12-inch line? Okay, that's the line I'm talking about.
That was a big catastrophe.
Right.
For the city, until the church stepped in.
Right. What happens to that line?
That line still exists. There's
Right.
still an easement requirement for that line. That actual line, the intent is to actually go back and repair that line to, because right now that was our main line to down to north. And sort of Norco. And our intent is, because currently it's inactive because of the previous
Okay, that's
issues
the one
that occurred there.
that's inactive.
The city is planning to go back and replace that line because it actually is very old and in not good condition anyway. So we will go through and replace that line. That's basically going through the adjacent church where the
Right.
damage was done in that area. And we may, depending on the condition, the pipe go all the way up to the reservoir. But there would be an easement requirement in this to maintain that, and the no physical structures over the pipe unless they sleeve it so we have easy access, etc.
So the inactive line crosses into this proposed development.
Yeah, it goes through this area right here.
It's kind of the little,
That little, kind of
little neck right
Yeah,
there
little neck
between the
right
two.
Yep.
Okay. And then you would require an easement on that.
We already have an existing easement. They
Okay.
have to make sure that they don't, that they acknowledge that easement exists.
And then the active 12-inch line connects to a 16-inch?
It's either 16 or 12, I'm not sure.
Okay, I think this is 16. All right, but and that connection would have to be made.
Yes.
So, let me try to wrap it up real quick on this first phase. With all of that street work, right? This is somewhat of a stretch, and I think we've touched base with it a little bit. You can condition to centerline street for all street improvements.
Correct.
Okay? I want you to think of a way to say, this is a full width street, 60 feet, I believe. And
That's the ultimate design intent. Yes.
ultimate design, right? And then you had mentioned like off-street parking. If you're gonna tear this whole road up, we need to find a way not to just improve to center line, okay, at 30 foot, but to do the full width street improvement, okay, with curb and gutter. And then if that property to the east is out with developed, maybe there can be a rebate situation or some type of credit. There has to be a way to do this because you're gonna, that street is in total disrepair. It's shot, and if you're gonna come through now with water, sewer, you're gonna go all the way down Norco Drive to Norco Drive. It's not gonna make sense just to have some trench patches. There has to be a broader scheme, a broader picture of what to do on that street. As it moves forward. I can stop right now.
Thank you, Greg. Ted?
I need to give up. I'm gonna go back and start off where Greg kind of left off. I see on there, is it A1? A1, you have your retention basin, and on your maps and on your photographs, I see a concrete swell that runs from the retention basin down there along the adjacent properties. Is that correct? There's one there, goes on to Norco Drive. And that goes down those properties. So any overflow from this basin is going to end up on Norco Drive.
Yes.
And you just told me there's no drain. There's no storm drains in Norco Drive.
The closest storm drain is on Norco, or is on Norco. There's nothing on Norconi that we can immediately.
Okay, so Norco Drive has storm, that's what I thought. There was, so that if any overflow water, it's going to go on Norco Drive.
Right.
Even though, I'm going to back up my partner here, is that there should be, and all the years that my folks had the dairy and everything else, you retain water on your property. You're supposed to for 24 hours. So we'll live with that one. So I would have some kind of a deal where that water has to stay there. Now, let me go back to the engineering point. The water, they're asking for a retention wall, correct? The water tank, will that wall affect the stability of that water tank up there or not? I know they're going to engineer it. So I'm looking at the engineers.
You're talking about this area here where the reservoir is, just so
Where you got on that A1, there's a big water tank. And they're going to cut down this hill to make this flat for their water tank, correct? I mean, for their structure.
Yes, to alleviate and level off their lot area, yes.
Okay, so my concern is the safety of this water tank if they're going to cut this hill down. and that, because we're taking the slope and changing it, and now we're creating even more runoff.
I'm being candid, I'm not familiar with the retaining wall, whether it's its size or whether it was an issue that Sam, our engineer, identified as being a concern. So I'd have to provide more information on that later.
I'm just looking at this. And that's what, that would be my concern, is the safety of an existing structure up above that, if you're doing any grading up below it.
I don't think, based on the drawings, there's a retaining wall where the main sanctuary is along, adjacent to our residence.
So that, the tank sits, and according to your tank sits around 830, 835 elevation? Okay. We'll concede 835.
Yeah.
And so the actual pad that's going to be there shows around 820 to, is it about 815, 820? So it's going to drop. You're talking about at least 15 to 20 foot drop in the hill, real quick elevation. From where our existing water tank sits down to there. Is that what they're going to grade down? Okay.
You're right.
All right, well, again, that's quite a bit of runoff coming over there. I worry about the stability of that tank up there. Okay.
It's a lot of water weight.
We good? All right.
We're good.
All right, I just want you guys to look at that in your conditions. And then finally, I saw you did the line of sight, and Greg asked a lot of questions I already had. We have an historic building sitting the next street over, on 5th Street. The elevation of this structure, this is probably going to be one of the higher structures on that hill. And Kevin, you probably know better than I do. How much is that going to impact the visual view of the Lake Narconian Hotel as far as historic value? Have you guys looked at that? The view from that. We pick on the Navy all the time for their view, even though it's adjacent property. We picked on the view of the buildings that are right behind the DMV on to Town and Country. Yet this thing is going to be in view, looking at from the Lake Narconian Hotel, looking north.
That did come up in discussions. The applicants had hoped to get approval of the original elevation. The impact of the visibility of this site from the Lake Narconian Hotel site, it's hard to quantify what that impact is and what the threshold would be, because some would look at it and say, you know, it's different architecture and it adds to the ambience of Norco, and some would say it doesn't match the Narconian at all and it's not Western. There's no way to quantify what that impact is because we don't have any kind of established threshold to say that this is bad or this is good. Because there's a lot around the Narconian that doesn't reflect the Narconian architecture. So.
But no one ever took into aspect. I mean, did we talk to Bill Berkman at all?
No, to my knowledge, he's not looked at this project.
Okay, it might be something we may want to consider. And then I guess the final now I'm going to leave it at that. Great, beat it up pretty good. Thank you.
So, as Ted said, Greg covered a lot of stuff. I guess my concern about it is that we got a separate set of plans that were completely different. And there's a process in place for going back to planning and doing all those things. And for me, when we have a process in place, that should be used. And I just don't think it's equitable or fair that we were presented a different set of plans than what Planning Commission got. I want Planning Commission to be able to do their job. This is definitely not my area of expertise, and that's why we have the Planning Commission. And so my preference would be that they follow the protocols and go through the steps, just like everybody else does. So that's kind of where I'm at, in addition to all the things that they brought up, yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
One of the things that they were hoping, well, what they were hoping is that you would overturn the planning commission and approve the project, obviously.
Pre-second drawing,
No, original drawing.
or, yeah, original drawing.
But if that was not going to happen and you were going to deny the project, their second choice would be that the denial be changed to a denial without prejudice, so that they could go back to the planning commission. And the new elevations were presented in hopes of encouraging that scenario, showing that they would cooperate with the planning commission.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess just one additional comment. Absent the additional drawings, there wouldn't have been any basis upon which you'd send something back to the planning commission, because there's no indication there would be anything new. Oh,
I feel like
the council could have, in line, discuss things that they would prefer to have the project changed to reflect and send that back to the planning commission. But I think in this case, it was, now you have something concrete to do that.
Yeah, I just feel like this has kind of been different, because every time before they've come with the original project, we said, we nitpicked on things and then said, okay, now take it back to planning, where I just feel like it's kind of overstepping the process that's in place.
I can't say that, well, I would disagree with that. I can't say that it's been uniformly applied.
Right.
Berwin?
Yeah, I want to continue a little bit of what Councilman Newton was talking about when that water line broke over there before, when that bulldozer broke it. That wreaked a lot of havoc on the neighborhood over there off of Norco Drive, because it went from about 4 blocks, wasn't it, Greg, that there was at least 6 inches of mud in Norco Drive besides Alhambra and all of that. Well, then that never was, even though they repaired the water line, they done a lot of damage there for the future, because I remember about 2 years ago, one of the last great rains we've had, that it was like when that water line broke. Wasn't quite as much mud, but there was a whole lot of it came across there and went down Norco and back on Alhambra, those little side streets, probably 2 or 3 inches there, running up on the curbs and stuff. And with these retention basins that they've got set on here, and the thing fills up and runs over, besides getting a heavy rain, and that heavy rain would cause them to fill in a hurry and overflow, and then you got that slope there. I'm afraid we'd run into the same problem there. We'd be damaging the people that's been living over there for 25 or 30 years with this. And one question, Steve, that I don't understand is, why are they raising this so far above the street?
The applicant would, I don't want to speak for them, but in order to get the amount of grading involved, the further down you go, the more grading it requires and the more expensive it gets. So what I'm assuming, and I'll let them answer better for themselves, is that they figured out how far down they had to go for the pad to accommodate the size of the building, and then stopped there and accommodated the rest of what would be needed with the height of the retaining walls and leaving it 20 feet above the height of Norconian Drive. So I'm assuming it was to reduce the amount of grading and the overall cost of the structure.
But when you elevate a project, then you are causing a lot of runoff and drainage problems. We all know that water runs downhill.
Certainly, when you
Most places it does anyway.
when you flatten out the pad, it definitely increases impervious surface, and that's the runoff that's got to be accommodated on site. And to the point that, like the city attorney spoke about before, when it exceeds the on-site, when it starts going off-site, it can't be in a greater capacity or a higher speed than it was before the project was developed. So there's got to be a lot of on-site retention to let it percolate into the soil.
Right, and if this is not raised up 20 feet's a pretty good step up above the street. The lower you get, the less runoff you're gonna have, and I disagree with that running off on the next piece of property. That's caused some major range wars in the world, and especially over there off of those little streets off of Corona Avenue on north of 6th. There's been some major battles over there with water going from this guy's place over to the next one and the next one like that. And I had the same thing at my place when I moved into it 20 years ago. Water coming out of one place, across mine and across another one there, and then it was stopped by another neighbor who was flooding us out until went over and cut a hole in there, burned and got rid of it. But, there was supposed to be a major war over that deal. I have a problem with that drainage, and like Ted said, how many gallons of water does that tank hold with there, Chad? A million?
I don't know that number by heart, sorry. I'd say probably at least $1 million though.
1,008 pounds to the gallon, and you go to cutting away the foundation below there, and you get a good shaker or something like that, that could wipe out half of the town. That thing went off in there. So, you got to look at a lot of this stuff before I vote to approve any of it. Thank you.
I just have some questions before we open public comments. One, so 25 feet sitting on top of 20 feet? So the Norconian, by the way, just for the record, is 62 feet high.
35.
No, the Norconian, so it'd be 35, oh yeah, 35.
You said 25 on top of 20, it's
Right.
35 on top.
So it's almost as high, but on a higher elevation. And you've been working with them for 2 years on this?
Yeah.
And then the other question I have is, I'm curious, did they bring up the alternative? Because as I looked at Planning Commission, they actually seem to trying to steer them to a lower height. They tried to steer them to a more western, that's true.
Well, let me back up. What the Planning Commission, they were trying to figure out how they could approve the project with conditions. And ultimately,
So they were, I get,
ultimately, they determined there was so much that needed to be done with the project, it just wasn't even feasible to try and correct it, I guess was the final.
were they open to the suggestions?
No.
At the meeting, I would say,
They're
that was
behind
not-
you shaking their heads
Oh, I
no.
know.
So I have the answer, all right, that's good.
Good.
And then, was there did the Historic Commission, when that tank was built in 1957, it brought Norco into the modern world. That was our first, other than the ones built by the Navy, that's what took us away from open reservoirs. Did that go before the Historic Commission, was that mentioned? It's 50 years old, built in 57 or 59, I can't remember, but it would have to come under our own code, but also would have to come under SEQA, the Historic Preservation Code. Was that discussed?
It did not go to the
Or
historical.
was it discussed, the fact that there should have been a SEQA review on that? At least the historic aspects of that?
Well, the project site is under 5 acres, so by secret rules, it's exempt.
But wouldn't it have to go under the historic end of that? Because it's a structure, we do have a code now, anything over 50 years old, that's the criteria we use. It's just something, I'm just curious if that was discussed, because again, I'm not saying save it or not save it. The point is, that is what we went from open reservoirs to, that was the first Norco-produced community services district reservoir built in the city of Norco, fully enclosed. So I just think that there should be some care taken to that. The other thing too, just to Ted's point, and it's not a question, this is really for questions, and I have others. I want to, just so people understand that the Norconian isn't just the Norconian. The Navy came through and built 700 acres of a very specific Spanish colonial style building with tile roofs designed by one of the greatest architects that ever lived. And that, I think, a little bit needs to be respected. That's a building that if you stand in Eastvale, you look across the river and it's incredible to look at it. With the Norconian on the hill, and then you have that huge annex coming down the hill. That's all I have right now. So what I'm going to do, if the council doesn't mind, I want to open the public hearing. But before I do that, well, I'm going to open public hearing, and I want to get comments by the applicant first. So, the applicant? Who's the applicant? There you go. Welcome. You know what, you can both be the applicant. All right. Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sam Akbarpour. I'm with SAIC Engineers. I'm the engineer on this project, 400 South Ramona, California. Actually, I was so anxious to get here and relieve myself and answer some of the questions you guys have. As you know, we went through the Planning Commission, and a lot of residents show up here, and we heard their concern. And the only thing I was disappointed, really, we were not given the opportunity to have a dialogue, to come back, the project to be continue, we come back like what we did right now. We had all the answer for the people that were concerned here. I mean, they wanted different architectural, so we were willing to do that. But we were really surprised not to be shut down and not have the opportunity to come back and present what we have presented right now. So,
excuse me, sir, just one moment. Sure. Just as a matter of respect, if we could in the audience make sure that we keep our conversations as low as possible, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
as I said, really a lot of residents that they talk at that night, and then we wanted to have the dialogue to answer their question, to implement whatever they wanted, the concern they had. But unfortunately, the opportunity was taken away. We didn't have the opportunity for the project to be continued, we come back. So, as you see the new plan in front of you, we took some of their concern and implemented on the new project. They wanted some Western element architectural. We did, propose a new project. They wanted the height of the tower to be minimized. We minimized it below the 35, which is allowance height. I mean, we could work with this. I mean, I've been doing this for 30, 40 years now. I mean, so many of this planning commission, city council, I never seen not any project to get approved without having a dialogue. Unfortunately, that half of this, the puzzle was taken away. We didn't have a chance to establish that dialogue, see what the residents want, what the planning commission wants, what the city staff. We've been working with the city staff for 2 years over this project. I mean, this is not an easy site. It's really very complicated. We worked for 2 years with so many site plans until we could accomplish or design which is in front of you. Now I'm going to go over some of the concerns one of the councilmen had. First, it was a parking. I mean, this site is really designed even though with additional 5 or 6 parking. And the other concern you have regarding how the people sit down on 18-inch square feet. I mean, this is a cultural center. Obviously, they're gonna sit down on the floor. And then actually, really, I did present this one here for the planning commission. I went and sat down here how these people sit down. And if you sit down here, you take 7 to 8 square feet. A chair would take 18. Actually, if you put chair, you can sit more people in a room than sitting on the floor, which it takes about 6 or 7 square feet. So that minimizes that. And if you had a concern about Norconian, what we can do, suggest no parking sign. It would be posted on Norconian. The other concern you had, the improvement of Norconian. Right now, really, you can't even drive through that street. There's so many potholes. I mean, I think everybody goes different route. So we are willing to improve that street, have plus 10, and also I've been talking personally to Laura now that for the sewer improvement, we're gonna come all the way to Norco. We can somehow work out, something to improve the entire Norconian all the way to Norco. I mean, this is all the benefit this project is gonna bring here. Right now, I mean, it blends with the neighborhood. I mean, there are church north on the south and east, and this piece of raw land, which really, even though you probably have your, somebody go do weed abatement. That's this really nice project. And as you come in Norconian, the 20 feet is all landscape. I mean, nicely, it's gonna be a slope, gentle slope, and the retaining wall varies from 2 feet to 4 feet only. And then the slope will be gentle, landscape with the drought, drought tolerance, all of that, and would be nice. And then if really driving through Norconian, you're not gonna be seeing any of this building at all. Now, the main concern you had regarding drainage. I'm the civil engineer, and I've been doing this for many, many years. These are the water quality. So we know the water goes downstream. Water doesn't go upstream. Right now, the existing church between this site and Norco has no drainage course at all. So when the rain comes, the water crosses Norconian, goes to our site, and then goes through the church. It floods all their playground equipment. Actually, we met with them several times. We even just suggested, even though I drew some sketch for them, how we can improve their site with a ditch or something to minimize this drainage in the future. And now, as a result of the development of this project, our site right now currently drains to that site. But once we develop this one here, first of all, the water quality is going to retain the drainage and then release it in 24 hours. So it would improve the condition as of the pre-development. So on all of these two basins, one the upper pad, one the lower, we can divert the flow. Actually, the upper one is a smaller basin, and there is a concrete ditch right there at the corner of the property, which currently the drainage goes there. So once we develop this one here and we have the basin, the water will be retained for 24 hours, then it will be released. So if they have any impact right now as a pre-development condition, there would be no problem on impact on a post-development condition. As far as the storm drain you mentioned, honestly, there is no storm drain on Norconian, and what we're proposing here is going to improve the condition. If the city suggests anything or they have something, we can work out. But what we do in the development that is what I'm proposing those basins is improving the drainage condition and minimize any drainage impact on the church. Sewer limit, you mentioned it, I know we are bringing the sewer from Norco, and as a result of that, as I've been talking to Laura, we're going to work out an agreement to improve the entire Norconian. And the water line you mentioned, really, I talked to Norco, that water, the 12-inch, I was told has been abandoned. And if that has to be reinstated or something, we can work out again. Again, the point of this is, all of this dialogue we have right now, we could have had a planning commission. To be continued, we come back. The opportunity was taken away from us. We didn't have a chance even to come back. We were really shocked, when all of a sudden they vote to deny the project. They could ask. We were here to address the concern of the citizen, to concern of any planning, any staff. We were here to work with you guys as a team. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity. And I really appreciate if you have any concern, if you want to refer us, go back to Planning Commission, we are willing to do that. We are willing as a team player to work with you guys to make this project work. And this project really, the whole member of it, this, I was asking them, it's maximum 150, and this is gonna be just occupied